Remember searching SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host and relationship coach. A very warm welcome from all of us here on British Muslim TV to all of you viewers, wherever you're streaming, whether it's live on Sky Channel 752, Facebook or Twitter. I would also like to invite you to join in the conversation tonight. And as you probably know, if you've been watching constantly, but if not, another reminder that you can call directly to our studios and speak to myself or my guest tonight on 01924231083. Do ask the bill payer's permission, as standard network rates do apply. You can also contact us via our free WhatsApp service, and that is 07585835150. You can also remain anonymous, and I can read out your messages. Please do continue to engage with us, interact with us. Love to hear your thoughts, any questions, any queries. We have amazing guests every night, and tonight is no different. And we're going to be discussing premarital counselling. We've mentioned it many times on the show, but we're going to divulge into it a lot more in depth. And we have with us a very, very special guest, and he is Noor Mohammed. Assalamu alaikum, Samir.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much for being with me tonight. We have been planning this for a while, and we're finally here. And I'm so happy that we're going to be talking about this topic, especially with yourself. Now, before we go into it, tell us a bit about, your profession and what you do.
So, by profession, I'm currently working as a psychotherapeutic counsellor in private practice called Noor Therapy, where I see clients both in individual counselling, pre-marital counselling, which is what we'll be shedding light on today, also group counselling, and also offering online and on-site workshops around mental health related topics with a specific focus around faith and how it can link in with faith and spirituality. Also honing in on the modality of transactional analysis and how that can benefit us. And being a teacher as well in my full-time job, so as you can see, I've got a number of hats. I try to deliver CPD workshops in educational institutes on how they can use transactional analysis and the science of temperaments to improve behavior management and enhance relationship with teachers and students. And I'm also currently working with the local mental health charity Mind on the MBAM project, which encourages more people from ethnic minority communities to access counselling.
Wow, I am even more impressed by everything that you've said and highlighted, and I'm even more honored to have you sitting with me today. We are very lucky tonight to have Samir, and listening to just that, brief, and I'm sure he does so much more, but, I thought I did a lot, but honestly, mashallah, it's amazing the work that you do, and also on top of that, giving your time for us tonight, which is so important, actually, especially on the topic that we're going to be discussing. We mention it a lot, but I would like you to define what is premarital counselling, please.
So I'm going to take a different take on this. Before defining it, I'd like to tell you what it isn't, because oftentimes I feel a number of different services or forms of premarital counselling can become sort of meshed and merged into one, and oftentimes there's no definitive definition of them. So what we don't mean by premarital counselling, from my own personal definition, is solely learning just the fiqh of halal and haram, of nikah and talaq. What we don't mean is knowing just your responsibilities and rights of marriage. Perhaps a term that we could give something like that is premarital guidance or premarital coaching. What I mean, from my understanding of premarital counselling, is this a safe space for the couple or the person interested in marriage, exploring their emotions prior to marriage and what they may have experienced within their childhood and adolescent years, and really trying to close that chapter before they embark upon this intimate and lifelong relationship with another person. And don't get me wrong, what I mentioned earlier about the fiqh of that, the halal and haram, the coaching of rights and responsibilities, it has its due place, but it's important to make differentiation, because oftentimes people think, oh yeah, I've had premarital counselling, and then you engage in a conversation with them and you realize, I don't think that was actual counselling. Maybe that was coaching. Maybe that was, learning the fardul ayn, the compulsory knowledge in relation to marriage. But counselling, we really are focusing on the emotions and what they are bringing into marriage in terms of their emotional and mental health.
I love that. I think it's really important. And it's quite interesting the way you defined it as well, to a certain extent, as to what it's not. But a lot of us look at counselling as something that we go to when we have an issue and a problem. We also feel that when we go to counselling, it's about, identifying our past more than being present and in the future. How would you respond to that sort of way of how people may associate counselling as? And when we talk about premarital counselling, it kind of doesn't really fit in that sense, because it's like as if, we're moving forward and counselling isn't really that as what most people understand.
Yeah, you're right in terms of the perspective you're coming from. I think, firstly, counselling itself is an umbrella term for talking therapies. And the way I often like to sort of define counselling, it's a process whereby we are attempting to explore something that the client has experienced in their life in the past, or is experiencing in the present, or has a fear that they may experience in the future, and exploring the emotions around that. And is also perhaps about attaching meaning to something that has taken place in their life. Oftentimes, the reason why we may be stuck or we can't let it go is because we haven't attached meaning to incidents and scenarios in our life. There still remains a question mark around it, like, the why. So in the process of counseling, there's an attempt to attach meaning to what may have taken place in life. And one of the ways that we do that from a faith perspective is look at that incident or scenario from the filter and lens of our faith, because ultimately it is our faith which gives us perspective. And when we look at it from the lens of our faith, it can help us make sense of that, and as a result, grant us solace and comfort. And then when we come to premarital counseling, so what we mean by this is oftentimes when people will enter into marriage, they may come with unresolved grief, bereavement, trauma, or whatever it may be. But it's about really what I call untying the knot before tying the knot. So that's what you want to do, untying the knot before tying the knot. And that's extremely crucial. And we'll discuss that further. But in terms of what you mentioned about it not having perhaps this positive connotation to it, I think the negative connotation is because we assume counseling is only for those who are really experiencing something quite dramatic in their life. But no, counseling is something that is just there to assist you. And oftentimes, dare I say, we might even engage in some form of counseling on a day-to-day basis for some people that are going through difficulty. But of course, in a session, it's in a more structured, safe and ethical manner. But it's definitely not something that is just needed at times of distress, because remember, prevention is better than cure. If you can deal with something and try to not let a certain emotion, such as depression, anxiety, enter into your life, it's always good to explore your emotion and know yourself before you end up perhaps falling into that pitfall.
That is very nicely explained. The other thing is as well, when couples are getting together, especially at the beginning, for a relationship, they don't normally fall into turmoil. They don't normally see that they do have issues until they do enter that marriage. So do you think that this is something that should be a prerequisite for everyone to just go into, whether or not they feel that they need it? Do you think that sometimes people are scared because it might unravel certain things? And can even people go by themselves, or does it have to be in a couple setting?
So we see that in Islam, we have, the concept of knowledge. Then the question rises that when it comes to seeking knowledge, how much do we have to seek and how much is perhaps optional? So we have certain knowledge which is classed as fardul ayn, compulsory upon every Muslim to know. And that includes knowledge about the jurisprudence on the 5 pillars, the articles of faith, and so on. But other than that, what also becomes compulsory for us to know about is any situation that we may enter into life. So if I am a trader by profession, it's a compulsory upon me to learn the jurisprudence and the Islamic ethics and morals pertaining to that trade, because now I'm engaging in that. Similarly, when we enter into marriage, it is my and anyone's responsibility to equip themselves with the knowledge about marriage, their rights, responsibilities, yes, the halal and haram, and also their emotional state and how they can become the best version of themselves in the marriage. Because remember, the Prophet ﷺ said that the best of you are those who are best to their family, and I am the best to my family, which shows us one of the purposes of marriage is to become that embodiment of mercy and compassion and good character towards our family. So this shows us there's a need for us to really do this from a religious perspective as well. In terms of like a legal perspective, interestingly, in Malaysia, before you sort of have your marriage registered, one of the prerequisites of that is to have had some form of premarital counselling. And even in the Jewish tradition, in the synagogue, 6 months before your marriage date is set, from Jewish friends I've heard, that they have to start 6 months before that and going into certain sessions and lessons in the synagogue. So, you know, there definitely is a need for it to perhaps be formalized and encouraged, you know, preferably. And I always talk to imams and ask them, have you had any premarital counseling? Make it a prerequisite when someone comes to you and says, can you do my nikah? You know, we have to work from somewhere. But definitely from my understanding, from our faith perspective and our responsibilities that we have, and from a sort of moral and ethical, it definitely should be a prerequisite to marriage.
Oh, that is absolutely wonderful. I loved everything that you've said so far, and it's such an amazing introduction. We are coming into a break very shortly, but just to recap how important it is to understand this sort of premarital counselling, and the sort of in-depth detail that, you know, Samira has provided so far has really, really described what it really entails and what it doesn't. So everybody that's listening, please do take notes. I would actually have a notebook and take things down, because right now you're going to get this for free, and you're going to actually have, you know, an opportunity to even call in and ask any questions that you have. Please don't be shy. We are here to serve you and make sure that you get all your questions answered. And if you do want to remain anonymous, we're happy to read out your questions and comments by keeping you private. The other thing is also, we're going to come back and we're going to ask Samira some many more questions. But before we do, I just want to also remind anyone that if you have any sort of issues or triggers, then do please contact BritishMuslim.tv/support, because a lot of us can get triggered by many things that are mentioned, and we want to make sure that you are taken care of and you are obviously taking care of your well-being. So inshallah, we will be back and we will see you in a short while. Take care. Salam.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. Having an extremely wonderful conversation with our professional, Samir, who is talking about premarital counselling. Really, really interesting. And I really want to go back to the question I asked before, which we didn't get a chance to finish before the break, which was, when you're thinking about coming to counselling, would you recommend it be when you are actually with your partner, or can you actually do that and get the knowledge, as you described before, by yourself?
So I think, firstly, premarital counselling, it can be divided into two different sort of modalities of working. One could be in the form of group education, and the other could be, yes, working with both of them or one-to-one. So group education is, you know, receiving this content in the form of psychoeducation. So learning about, you know, common sort of mental health disorders and how to have coping mechanisms prior to embarking into a relationship. The second is when you're working literally within a therapy room. And in an ideal world, it should be with both parties, because that's how they're going to get the optimum benefit of the session. And it shows that both of them are truly invested in the process together as well. So, and, you know, and from there, because the whole process for them to learn about each other as well, learn about compatibility, their morals, their values and their boundaries. However, sometimes they may feel that they may want a one-to-one session to talk about some personal issue from the past, but they want to lay them to rest before entering into marriage. So what I have found is the vast majority, I'd say 60% of the time, it happens with both parties together. However, at times it can be requested to have individual sessions. So what I usually do is have sessions of both of them together, but then in between them, I might have a follow-up call with them, see how things are, and then at the end have a one-to-one as well. So both can work, but the best method is to have both parties present.
Perfect. No, that's very clear. And I think it's very important that we understand the process as well. So going a bit further, what does a good curriculum of premarital counselling look like?
So I think, in terms of our religious knowledge, there has to be the knowledge of, the law of, okay, what is marriage in terms of the contractual element of that. And that's really interesting as well, because, a lot of people, if perhaps they knew their rights, they would know that they could stipulate certain things within their contract, and that could deter certain problems in the future. So again, the premarital counselling space offers them a space to discuss. Are there any conditions they want to put down? Are there not any conditions? And where do we stand on that? And that will reveal a lot about their character as well, and their mindset. So you've got the law element of that, the contractual element. And then, of course, it's important to know, even though it may feel uncomfortable, but about divorce as well. Because how many marriages do we have when, I divorced her when I said this or I said that, but I was angry. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't in my senses. But in some schools of thought or some sort of opinions, that may not be good enough. What's said is said. So it's better to learn the knowledge of that in order to avoid falling into that trap and be more vigilant about your words and actions. So you've got the law element. And then in terms of the sort of individual responsibilities, what their responsibilities are, and then what the other person's rights are as well. And then we come to perhaps, I would say, one of the most important elements, and that's the tahveeb al-akhlaq. So knowing about refining their character, knowing about, morally what looks like a good husband, a primary caregiver, what is a good wife in terms of the Islamic models and values. And then we can discuss other intricate topics such as finances, the role of religion in their life, what the concept of marriage means to them, certain perspectives on parenting. But the reason I said that the most important is akhlaq. Now, if you think about a time when I'm aware that you work as a coach as well, that a client may come to you and say, I'm experiencing this problem in my marriage. And let's say it's anger. Now, one could say, if you go down one route, did you know that if you say this when you're angry, that's haram, that's not Islamic? That's one route. But often that's a very surface level observation of the anger and a surface level answer as well. Because most of the time, and I may be wrong, most of the time, I think people actually know that that's haram and that's not how it should be Islamically. But it's about the inner turmoil that's within. What is it that makes them react in that situation that way? Why do they get triggered? Is it because of something which may have happened in the past? Does it remind them of a certain memory? And hence, going back to the point, this is why in premarital counselling, it's about really exploring the emotions. So you're getting to the right at the bottom of why they react in certain ways. Because like I said, I honestly believe people know that this is wrong and this is right. We do all have some sense of a moral compass, but it's about really looking beneath the surface at why does this person react in anger this way and addressing the root cause of it, and not just perhaps the branches of that.
Yeah, I think as you were talking, it made me also think about the type of person that be willing to come to this kind of premarital counselling, because again, it's quite scary to know that you're going to be actually outlining your true self from the beginning. Because I know a lot of couples come to me, or even individuals, and they are very scared to ask these uncomfortable conversations to their partners because they're scared of losing out in that relationship. And they've worked so hard to find somebody. So if this was to be opened up and to say, you need to go to counseling, it's a scare. So what would you advise somebody that if they are scared that it's going to open up some old wounds, some, unhealed sort of past sort of, whether it's trauma or depression or even just something simple that they're scared of and they haven't really addressed? How would you encourage them that, this kind of thing is actually something that they can move forward with And there may be a risk, though, that, opening up to your partner, that it may not be that relationship for you even at that time, or, it could be strong. What would you sort of respond in that sort of sense?
So I think there's a couple of things with that. Firstly, it's about developing the understanding, like we mentioned earlier when defining counselling, that it's not just for those who are in emotional turmoil or, are really in extreme distress. So explaining to the potential spouse, perhaps what counselling actually is and the benefits of counselling and what it isn't. And secondly, I would say, perhaps maybe if your potential partner or the person you're conversing with really isn't coming around to the idea, even after explaining, all I'll say is maybe that's a little bit showing off their investment and showing a little bit of their character. And maybe that tells you a little bit about compatibility as well. And I think thirdly, again, the understanding of counselling, that it means that I've got to go in the room and I have to tell them every single thing wrong I've ever done in my life. Even when I was 5 years old and I went to the shop and stole a cola bottle from the shop, I have to tell them that. No, not necessarily, right? You're laughing. Does that mean you've done that, Fahima?
No, it's because I've heard it so many times that people are scared because, like you said, at the end of the day, they feel that it's going to reveal a lot about themselves, not necessarily the trauma.
Exactly.
But, we're always coming into a relationship wanting to put our best foot forward, and we want to show this amazing self. And I guess there's a lot of pressure, not just from your spouses, but even the parents are worried for their children, adult children, to be married, so they don't want to see and show any flaws. That's why I asked that question.
You're
and
right.
I think
so
that's the problem.
It doesn't mean that you have to come and share everything and anything. You'll share what's relevant and what's coming up for you. And you will have sometimes you have to trust yourself and trust your gut instinct that, I feel I need to say this or share this because of this reason. It doesn't mean, it's not like the confession room where you said everything you've done wrong. No, it's about what's relevant, what's important, and what you feel is needed to further create that bond. And like I said, untying that knot before tying the knot. And then I think finally, in regards to, someone still not coming around, and you're right, I really like the point that you made about it is a big struggle out there for people to find someone. And then if we're saying, you've got to go have counselling as well, if your spouse isn't having it, this is showing off them. Yes to all of that. But I think one of the ways that tide could be settled or made easier is, once again, if the person performing the nikah also, promotes this, because they are seen as a person of authority. And perhaps the spouse, whether the male or the female, is quite hesitant, then, they will perhaps maybe take their advice upon board. And whereas they may misinterpret their spouse saying that as, there's something wrong with you, that's why you need to come. But as a person of authority saying that, perhaps it holds more weight and hopefully will be taken a lot more seriously.
No, absolutely. Like, I see things from both sides, dealing with it from, a perspective of, dealing with clients, as well as looking at it from a client's point of view, because obviously doing this kind of job as well, opens up my eyes as to what people would actually question and ask. So, you kind of have to look at it from different perspectives. But I actually do agree with everything that you're saying. And I do feel that it's highly important. And I know that even with the fear of, really getting to know your spouse, a lot of the times I realize as well, when people do break up, it's because they haven't addressed things at the beginning. And I'm not saying that, it is going to break your relationship, but if you can go through that uncomfortable conversation at the beginning, it will actually save your marriage in the future. So that's what I was trying to, eventually get to. So, even with the fear, even with the worry, I really do feel, just like yourself, that it's highly recommended for both parties to be open and honest. And whatever comes up, just trust the process. Honestly, it is for your benefit. And inshallah, it's only going to make your relationship stronger when it goes in the future, because that's what we want to have. Because a lot of us are just looking for that immediate, marriage, and, thinking that, we're just going to tie the knot. Our parents are happy. We found the one. But, so much things happen even in the beginning of the year, right? In that first year when you absolutely have no clue about each other, even if you've known each other. So this really does allow the space for you to really get to know them. And I loved everything that you said about, the kind of things that you would address in the actual session. We're going to come back from a break soon. But what I'm going to also add is that when we do come back, we're going to be talking more about the questions that, every spouse can ask each other, not just in the session, but when they're even out of the session. Because a lot of people think that, the work only gets done in the session, but actually a lot of work is done when you actually leave and when you actually reflect and, when things are put into play. And if you're actually dealing with a professional, they will give you bits and pieces to do outside as well, where you have to actually be accountable for some of the homework or, listening, learning or journaling or whatever it may be. So, sessions in between sessions are just as important. So it's really, really important that we do understand this process. And Samir has definitely highlighted some important factors. And I cannot wait to come back and discuss more of it, especially the modalities, the terminologies, the distinctions that are involved. And again, this is such an important topic for everyone that is seeking a relationship. It's not about finding someone who is, beautiful, having the right, height and finance. And, even, you wanting someone who is, religious and praying, that still is not just enough. So we're going to try and help you out here, inshallah. But do come back and we will have more conversation with Samir, where we're going to be discussing premarital counselling in depth with him. Join us in a few moments. Take care and see you shortly. Salam.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We're here with the wonderful professional Samir, who is discussing premarital counselling and has done so much work around this and so much experience. And I'm really loving all the content and all the sharing his insights with us as well. And, you're so mellow. I'm actually feeling quite relaxed because normally I'm just like, quite, loud, but you're kind of calming me, which is a good thing. So maybe this is like how it is in your sessions as well. So describe to me, what are the conversations and the questions that the spouses may ask each other or that they can actually ask outside, just to give a little bit of a taster, because I know you mentioned a bit, but just give us a little bit more in-depth sort of like questions that will happen.
So within the session, I always find it beneficial to have some sense of structure because, when they're coming into a session, I mean, I've been in personal therapy myself as a trainee psychotherapist. We had to have for personal therapy during that process. And I can remember that it's quite daunting that you're sitting down and in front of a therapist and maybe there's those sort of dynamics there as well. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to start it off. So I would usually give them some form of stimulus for discussion. So I may share with them a fable or a story and see what both of them derive from that. And that will show you a lot. Some, it was funnily enough, I remember sharing a picture once and it was of two horses, but they were sort of slightly different. The statue were made differently. And one said the other one is showing fear and the other statue is showing hope. But the other person said something completely different. He said that it looks as if the horse A has said a joke to horse B and they're both laughing. So two totally different perspectives. So things like that, it reveals something about the character. Doesn't mean it reveals something good or bad, but this shows you that their perspective, how they think, their thought processes. So I will share a stimulus for discussion, and I always find that's really good because from that stimulus and discussion sprouts out different ideas and concepts and different emotions, and we can, that's one way of going about it. Another is maybe giving them a topic and saying, what are your thoughts on this? So for example, we might say, okay, what's your concept of marriage? What does marriage look like to you? Can you give me an example of a good relationship that you have seen modeled? Because that's sometimes a problem that people have, that in therapy, they'll say, I've never seen a good relationship in my life, that I don't know what it looks like. So we can start to explore that rather than it coming on later in their life. And then we'll also have a look at the role of religion in their life. What does religion mean to you? Yes, you both identify yourself as a Muslim. What role does it play in your day-to-day life? And how do you envision it playing a role in your marital relationship? And then also, I think, especially a lot of some of the work that I do in the area that I live in with the subcontinent community is around extended families. So what expectations you have of your spouse to have with your family and vice versa. because, you know, that's one of the reasons of marital breakdowns, of why people have problems in their marriage. So good to have that discussion that, you know, what are your expectations towards your family? What do you expect of me? What type of relationship do you want me to have with them? And then see whether there's a clash there in mentalities and sort of mindset. So a stimulus, a sort of a topic where they can share their idea, and there may be a question to see different perspectives is usually the format that I have, but that's a structure that I give them. But at the same time, any questions they have that they would like to bring, they're more than happy to bring them, or something that they would like to discuss, because ultimately the process is about them. So I do give them that ownership, but where I feel they're a bit hesitant or a bit shy or reserved, I don't hesitate in giving that stimulus to them. I suppose that's my teacher hat coming into play there.
No, I love that. That is so interesting. You know, it just reminds me about, you know, obviously the psychological understanding of, you know, human-minded behavior. And the stimulus is exactly that, when you learn about psychology and how you see certain things, how you read certain things. And at the same time, you know, couples are asking, you know, what's your favorite color? You know, where would you like to travel? And these are all important things that you can discuss. But if you really want to know a character of a person, how they think, and even themselves, they understand themselves better, because we don't even know sometimes by giving ourselves that time to even reflect, you know, when we give an answer, when we give a response, when we react, what does it mean? How does it look to the other person? Now you're actually going to be considering and responsible for somebody else as well. So I love that. And that's why it's really, really important. I mean, I was going to ask you, why is marital, you know, pre-marital counselling important? But, you know, we're highlighting it as we speak, to be fair, to actually know what it is. That,
like you mentioned, that it reveals a lot about your character. Now, remember, the Prophet ﷺ said that to truly know someone's character, you know, you will have to travel with them, because in the times of traveling, you may have delays, you may have difficulties. You can see how people react to certain situations. And another was you're trading with them. You know, you see someone's honesty, whether it's their ego, whether genuinely telling there's a fault with this item. And there was a third scenario, but it's not coming to mind. But the point being is that oftentimes when you're entering into marriage, you've not been in a relationship with them before. You maybe have not traveled with them. You've not traded with them, but you should do what you can within your capacity. And that is what we call tawakkul. You know, tawakkul, ultimately reliance upon God, is ultimately when you have made your effort, and then you leave the rest to God. So if you want a nice way of putting it, perhaps a very simplified version, pre-marital counselling is a form of having tawakkul ala Allah, tawakkul, reliance upon God, before you embark into marriage.
Oh, that's beautiful. No, absolutely correct. I really resonate with everything you're saying. I agree with everything that you're saying. And even as you mentioned, you know, we don't have these kind of like premarital relationships where we actually have those kind of, you know, dating and going out and spending time or living, you know, before marriage. So these are very smart ways of getting to know somebody. And actually, it's quite intellectual without having to break the boundaries and the guidelines of that person. And I think even when you travel, you can still miss out if you don't know what you're doing and you're blinded and you're just going, you know, into things without actually much meaning and purpose. And you're creating that meaning and you're creating that purpose, and you are showing you know, the other person a side of you that, you know, you may not even realize, but it's not all bad. We all assume that it's bad, but it's actually just showing that this is how we deal. There's a different perspective. If two people looking at the same incident, you know, they're going to describe it slightly different, and it's absolutely fine. So these are the kind of issues even and the problems that happen when marriages are having, you know, turmoil. So by, you know, addressing it from the beginning, you're actually knowing yourself and your partner a lot better. Do you think that there's a certain timeline that you normally give for these premarital counselling? I know it obviously differs case by case, but is there like sort of, because you obviously have a program and you've got set sort of stage, normally people don't go outside that if they need extra sort of sessions. What would you say, you know, is the actual amount of sessions or time that, you know, you would need for something like this?
I think, you know, the first thing is, like you said, it's very subjective to each individual and each scenario. So I often don't like to put a number to it, but what I will try to do is put a cap on it. And I'll explain the reason for that. Is, I think, firstly, in terms of the session itself, when you start off, it's good to just see how things go. You know, what is the bringing up? Because in the first 2 sessions or 3 sessions, it'll really show you, you know, how things are going and which direction they're perhaps turning towards or, you know, sailing towards in some respect. But The reason I sometimes like to put a cap on it, let's say, for namesake, 6 sessions or 8 sessions, is because, oftentimes this is quite a generic comment now, when it comes to therapy or counseling, and people have their different perspectives, and, respect to everyone who has their own personal take on this. But what I find is that sometimes, especially within the Western models of psychotherapy and counseling, it can often be a case of just validating someone's emotions. In the case of, I can really see you're feeling that. You have a right to be hurt. You have a right to be angry with your mom, or you have a right to be angry with your spouse. There's a validation, but it's like, what next? What's after that? And what I find with Islamic psychology and Islamic counseling, yes, we give the empathy, and we want to validate that emotion because that is important. But there's always then, okay, now what? What's next from there? There needs to be some element of solution-focused interventions after the empathy and after the sort of consolation of emotions. So similarly, one of the reasons we do that as well, because we want them to one day be able to live their life independently and not live their life, solely relying upon the therapist. The therapist has a role in their life for a certain portion. And after that, you want to give them independence. Similarly, with premarital counseling, is we want to give them guidance, support, tell them the support network and the mechanisms they need. But it will come to a certain stage when it's like, right, I've done what I could within your journey and facilitated that. I would like you to go away and think within what we call in transactional analysis, in your adult ego state, use your own logic now, your rationale and your reasoning to decide what you want to do. And that's true empowerment. We often think empowerment is just saying that, oh, yes, you have to honor your feelings and you have a right to feel that. That's good. But true empowerment is then to make them independent, to use the resources, the logic and the reasoning they have to make their decisions in their life. And they're gaining the foundation and the philosophical underpinnings from the therapy.
Yeah, you mentioned transactional analysis as well, which I've touched on myself previously. Could you maybe give a brief sort of introduction as to what does that entail? What does that mean, the adult, child, and ego, and parent ego states? Just before we go into the break, we have a couple of minutes, sure. But yeah, I'm sure you can explain that.
Yeah, so transactional analysis is a form of psychotherapy and developed by Dr. Eric Berne. And you have many models within TA that help you to really understand yourself better and your emotions. And one of the models that we just made reference to is called the PAC model. So parent, adult, and child ego state model. So the parent ego state is so the philosophy of Dr. Eric Berne is that in every moment, we're either in our parent ego state, adult ego state, or child ego state. When we are in our parent ego state, we are said to be feeling, thinking, and behaving as our parents or primary caregivers would do in response to a situation. When we are in our child ego state, we are said to be thinking, feeling, and responding in ways that we would do as we would in our childhood to a situation in the present. And our adult ego state is when we are responding to the here and now, being present, using our logic, our rationale, our reasoning, and the resources we have. So one of the purposes of therapy from a TA perspective is to strengthen the adult ego state so we become more present in the here and now and use the resources that we have to face situations that we have in our life.
Lovely. And that is such a wonderful sort of like ending before we get to the break. And just to say that we talk so much about communication, but we need to know how to communicate. So that is a very good way of describing and knowing. So every time you talk, you're going to know and sort of be aware and have that insight about the adult, child, and parent ego state. Because again, when you just communicate is so different to just saying it's about just talking. It's about how you talk and what you bring to that conversation and what kind of, state you're in, and so much more involved. But no, thank you so much for sharing that with me, Samir. And again, we are kind of...
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I can't believe that we've gone so fast and quick on this episode, but we've given so much relatable content, and Samir has highlighted so much of the learning that we're going to find so useful in this episode. So please rewind, take note, go back, and if you've missed anything, I really do urge you to watch the episode again, because it's so important with everything that's been said so far. Samir, you touched earlier on something which I really want to come back to when it came to, external sort of factors that do play part in our marriages. And that is a lot to do with, the families, the dynamics. There's a lot of culture that happens within the Muslim community that is, first and foremost, more than even faith and religion in many societies and certain communities and backgrounds, unfortunately, which is not in line with the values of Islam. And that's why we do have so much of abuse and, dominance. And it's like, when you come into my house and this person takes control, and make sure you understand that rule, especially when the daughter-in-law is involved, coming into a new family. How would you address something like that?
So I think it's good to go from perhaps a micro level to a macro level on this topic. So let's first hone in on both individuals themselves. And I think oftentimes people are asking, what's a success to marriage? How can we master the arts of relationships? And as cliche as it might sound, and as simple as it may sound, it comes down to your character. Because, the way you respond to a situation and how someone may trigger you and how someone may conflict with you is dependent upon your character ultimately. And it's about reminding oneself, for both individuals, how when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when God Almighty in the Quran describes the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Innaka la'ala khuluqin azim," that indeed you possess a azim character. Now, the word azim, it can be translated as magnificent, amazing, high. But let's pause a minute. We have to understand that when we are conversing with someone, the vocabulary that we use will be dependent upon two factors. So number one, it'll be dependent upon our knowledge. So our knowledge about, whether this is amazing and why we are saying this is amazing, and our experience. So for example, if a child comes and says, "Oh, this is amazing," right? And it might be something to do with science. And then someone comes with perhaps done an A-level in science and said, "This is amazing." And then someone that's done a PhD, I'm sure you can agree there's going to be a spectrum in difference as to what they classify as amazing. So
Yes.
When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the Prophet's character is azim, we cannot even fathom and understand the high rank and the pinnacle of his amazing character. So what we learn from that is character is what we need to refine within ourselves in order to make this relationship successful. And of course, we can only do what we have within our capacity. So that's with both spouses. And then it comes down to, okay, the immediate families of them. So again, in the pre-marital counselling process, it's important to understand that what are your expectations of me in regards to your family? How am I, what do I need to know about them? In terms of so don't offend them, having that a bit of awareness rather than someone saying later on, "Oh, you said that to my brother or my dad and this offended them, but didn't you know this?" What you can tell them, you should tell them. Because people, if I play devil's advocate, yeah, but how can I tell everyone everything? You can't, but you can tell them what you know, right?
Yes.
You can tell them what you can, and that's what it is ultimately. It's about that mentality that in life, I can only do what is within my capacity. But often we become extremists even in our mentality. I'm either not going to tell them nothing at all, or I'm going to tell them everything. But I can't tell them everything, but I don't say nothing. We end up in confusion. So the spouses, and then the extended family, and then learning a little bit about their friends as well. Who do you socialize with? What do you like doing with your friends? Will reveal a lot about someone's character, whether they're, an introvert, extrovert, whether they're social, and what they like doing in their free time. And then also their relationship with their community and nature. What rank and what value they give to the environment around them and nature. It can show a lot. That it can show that perhaps by having a good relationship with nature, they're a reflective person. It can show if they have no awareness about their nature, is perhaps they need to become in attune with nature itself. because, you know, nature itself, it has a big role in our mental health, our spiritual health in all forms. So really going in from that micro to macro perspective on understanding the person, I can say with confidence, you know, in this regard anyway, is that it will certainly tell you a lot about the other person, and it'll prove to really change you as a person, and you will ask questions to yourself that you would never ask before.
Beautiful. Wow. That was such an amazing explanation. And, you know, I love everything, how you describe it and how you put it into perspective so that we can really have an understanding. And even as you explained it, you know, you're actually, you know, advising people as to, you know, you're speaking in this in this particular way. This is what it entails. This is what it means, you know, whether you are, you know, into your environment or nature, whatever it is, and what you are. So you actually bring in awareness to that person's character and even some of the things that they can even highlight to improve. And it's not about saying that you're bad or you're wrong. It's more like, you know, we're just growing and developing. And sometimes we know it, and sometimes we just need to, you know, push ourselves a little bit further. So that's really a healthy way of looking at counseling.
I really like the point. So you said there about, it's not about they're good or bad. You know, when we have this science of the science of temperaments, you know, you have a melancholic personality, sanguine, choleric, and phlegmatic. You know, people, when they're learning about this, it's like, oh, melancholic, does that mean the person really moody and bad? Oh, choleric or sanguine, you know, the life of the party, does that show something? And I remember when I studied this science with my a teacher in the field of naturopathy, he really emphasized none of them are bad. None of them are bad. They are all shakhsiyas, they are all temperaments, you know, that have been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not about them being good or bad. It's about balancing your temperament, and for the other person to know your temperament so they can help you balance it and gain the positive qualities of each temperament.
Lovely. Again, I could not have expressed it in any better myself than the way you have. But we have come to, you know, the last few minutes of the show. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I really want to, you know, ask you to sort of, you know, finalize this by, you know, for people out there that may not have that hope still, they may still find it very difficult to think about marriage. It's such a difficult process, and it's getting even harder nowadays. And there's so many breakdowns and people only looking at the negatives. So what kind of words can you give of maybe some comfort or hope to somebody who is struggling or finding it a bit difficult? So, you know, we definitely need to end this on a note where Samir shares that with us, because I think it's so important when we have, you know, so much of this information, when we talk about communication, when we talk about asking the right questions, you know, it's not just clear cut like that. You know, we need to understand the psychology behind it, the meaning behind it. That's what's really, really important, to know, you know, how to question your spouse, how to, you know, get and extract what is they saying, what does it actually mean? Now, you do need to sit with someone who is professional, who can highlight this for you, because a lot of the times, even if we do try and add meaning to it, it's not necessarily true, because a lot of it does come from psychology. It comes from learning and understanding human mind and behavior. So inshallah, if we can get it back before the last few minutes of the show, we can definitely get his last words in. But, you know, in the meantime, I just want to say again, you know, we love having the episodes every single week, and we enjoy even more so the fact that all of you do engage with us. You send in your messages, your comments, and even, you know, any sort of interaction that you do have with us. It's absolutely beautiful knowing that, you know, we continue in this way. Okay, Samir, before we end, could you just finalize? We've got a couple of minutes left with regards to giving hope to somebody who is struggling.
So I think you're absolutely right that a lot of time people often struggle with, you know, entering into marriage or even considering it because of feeling demotivated and what they hear. And it comes down ultimately to, I would say, a loss of hope. And I think my final message would be to, one of the downfalls in terms of mental health and of human beings in this time and age that we live in is the lack of hope that we have. But it's reminding ourselves that the Prophet ﷺ said that true faith is a balance between hope and fear. And also how when God Almighty in the Quran as well, he says that قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. That say, oh, my servants who have transgressed themselves, do not despair in the mercy of Allah. Now, what's really interesting over here, talking about marriage, if you're having a good day with your spouse, you know, you might be saying, you know, my darling, my beloved wife. You use the personal pronouns of possession. But when you're having an argument with your spouse, you don't be saying my anymore. You're saying you. right? The pronouns immediately change. You negate the possession. But look how when God Almighty, when he says that, when you've wronged yourself, when you've, let's say casually, when you've messed up, what does he say still? Oh, my servants. He doesn't create a distance between him and us anymore. He said, oh, my servants, when you have transgressed yourself, don't do what? Do not despair in the mercy of Allah. So we see from the Prophet, true faith is between hope and fear. And God is telling us, do not despair in the mercy of Allah. And I think finally, I would say, share this very short story in just a minute, which is that a famous story, you may have heard this as well. There was a deer who was in a forest, and the deer was a pregnant deer, and it was it's time to give birth, and the deer was found a safe place to do this. But what happened was she looked to the left and saw a hunter extending his bow towards her. She looked to her right and saw a hungry male lion that was approaching her. Now she's constrained over here by her natural predators. She can't go forward because there's a fire. If she goes walks backwards, there's a river there. She can't go anywhere. She's boxed in by her natural predators. There's nothing that she can do. But labor pains are beginning, and what can she do? Nothing is in her control right now. And now she doesn't have any action or reaction. She makes a decision. She makes a choice, and we all have choices in our life. She decides to focus on what she can, and she decides to give birth to a healthy fawn. And she does that.
Amazing.
And look at the sequence of events that follows. Lightning strikes a hunter. He releases the arrow, and it kills the hungry lion. The rain that comes, it douses a fire that was ahead of them, and she gives birth to a healthy fawn. So what we learn from that
amazing, Samir. Unfortunately, we have come towards the end. Can you just quickly give us a quick sort of intro as to how people can contact you before we end the show? Because we've only got about a few seconds left.
So in terms of contacting me, the best way to contact is to come to our website, which is noortherapy.co.uk, and also our Instagram page, noor_therapy, and our email address at info@noortherapy.co.uk.
Thank you so much. You've been an absolute gem. Inshallah, please do reach out to him. He's so wonderful. And I hope to see you soon. Assalamu alaikum. Have a lovely night.